Another very well done video package previewing the upcoming match. And that's just not only that, but just one other thing I like from this time period is just like the build up. Like, it feels like every match in this card, pretty much like has like a purpose and like it's like been built and it's like, it's got, like, I don't know, it just feels like it just belongs like on Mania. Like sometimes you really get these matches nowadays, or just these matches on like pay-per-views, and they're just like throwaways. I feel like that's just like, kind of like a lost art at times. Of course they have their things they get right, and whatnot, I guess, but I just think that's just something that they miss. And I also just miss the storytelling and like the organically created moments, like the ones that just like happen, like they just like organically are just made and just happen, rather than the ones that are just like forced. But here we are, one-on-one match between two of the greatest in-ring performers and professional wrestlers of all time. Two Hall of Famers. This was also a first-time matchup, and this would be the second time we'd see SmackDown versus Raw. Of course, the other interpromotional matchup was Randy Orton and Undertaker, which I didn't really point that out, but I guess I'm pointing it out here. So Kurt Angle would represent SmackDown, and Shawn Michaels would represent Raw. To begin the match, Shawn would slap Kurt to get him all fired up. Then he'd go into the mat game. Shawn would have Kurt in a headlock, and Kurt would try to suplex his way out of it, but Shawn would keep him grounded. Shawn, in the early part of this match, would try to beat Kurt at his own game by trying to out-wrestle him. Plenty of holds and grapples. Eventually, Kurt would get Shawn in the corner, and things would start getting more aggressive as both men would trade blows. Then Shawn would knock Kurt out of the ring. Then on the outside, Kurt would try to suplex Shawn in the announcer's table, but Shawn would fight out of it. He'd deliver some chops to Kurt, and then on the third one, Angle would duck and would get Shawn up in the Angle slam positioning and would try to get him back in the ring. I messed this up. Okay. So Kurt would get Shawn up in the Angle slam positioning, and then he would ram him back first into the ring post. Really good spot. Back at the ring, Kurt would deliver some suplexes and would go for the pin a couple times. Then he'd apply a body scissors and look to work on the back and abdominal region. Shawn would make his way back to his feet, trying to fight back, but Kurt would Irish whip him into the corner, turning him inside out. Classic HBK. Then Kurt would deliver a belly-to-belly suplex with both men back on their feet. Shawn would slap Kurt again, furthering infuriating Angle. Then Angle would nail Michaels with the hell of a clothesline. Angle would follow up in the corner with some European uppercuts and would try to set Shawn up in position for a superplex. But Shawn would knock him off and would attempt to hit the flying elbow, but Angle would move out of the way. Angle would look to lock on the ankle lock, but Shawn would reverse out of it. He'd send Kurt over the top. Then Shawn would dive from the top and the Angle with the crossbody. And then Angle, while Shawn was on the apron, would try to hit the German suplex. He tried to German suplex Michaels off the apron onto the floor. That'd probably kill him, but but Shawn would low blow him from behind while the official did not see it. This would noticeably draw some boos from the crowd. Then Michaels would do a springboard crossbody on an Angle on top of the announcer's desk. Table would not break, though. Then they'd do the double count-out tease, but both men would make it back in the ring. Later, Shawn would go for Sweet Chin Music, but Kurt would block it and grab Shawn's leg, applying the ankle lock. He'd have it locked in for quite a bit, but Shawn would make it to the ropes. Shawn would reverse it into a roll-up, but Angle would counter into the ankle lock once again. Shawn would counter with another roll-up, but then Angle would look to hit Sweet Chin Music once again, but then Angle would hit the Angle Slam. He'd cover Shawn, but Michaels would kick out at two. Just what a sequence I just named off right there. That is a lot, all in just one sequence there. That is crazy. Then the straps would come down, and Angle would then attempt a moonsault, but Shawn would move out of the way. Angle would crash and burn. Shawn would go back to the top, but fatigue would really start to show as he'd end up taking too long, and Angle would go up to the top, hitting Shawn with a super Angle Slam. Angle would go for the pin once again, but Michaels would kick out. Incredible stuff. Angle would yell in Michaels' face, telling him that he's going to tap out, and he's going to tap out, but Shawn would finally catch him with Sweet Chin Music, and then Shawn would cover Angle, but only to get a 2 count. the suspense is just real at this point. Everyone in the building was just so into this, making it a really great match. And then Shawn would grab Kurt, but Angle would immediately come back by applying the ankle lock. Michaels would fight it, trying to roll out of it, but Kurt would not let go. Kurt would then lock in the hold, and it'd ultimately be too much for Shawn as he'd be forced to submit, and Angle would win the match. One of the best WrestleMania matches I've ever witnessed. All the hype was there, and it absolutely lived up to all of it. Match of the night, possibly even year. So Kurt Angle would win here. They'd have a rematch at Vengeance of 2005, which maybe that's a show we'll cover sometime down the road. But Kurt Angle would win once again, 4 stars and 3/4. Absolutely phenomenal match. Next, we'd have Piper's Pit with Roddy Piper and Stone Cold Steve Austin. The night before WrestleMania 21, Roddy Piper was inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame as part of the class of 2005. So we'd have this segment with him and Austin here following the Angle and Michaels match, which was a smart call considering that it would have been awful for anyone, I don't care who you are, to follow that. Then Piper would ask the crowd who the biggest rebel in the WWE was, and the crowd would respond with Austin. Piper would say this is BS in response to that, but would bring out Austin for the segment. Austin would enter to a pretty big pop as usual, but when him and Piper would meet face-to-face in the ring, Roddy would welcome him to Piper's Pit by slapping him across the face. Then Austin would reply by, "Thanks for having me, you little son of a bitch," and would slap Piper back. Piper would make some fun of the what chants as he was speaking. He's handling that well than a lot better, and he's handling that a lot more well than some other people had in recent years. But then all of a sudden, as both guys are going back and forth, Carlito would come out. Carlito, with a microphone in hand, would say that Piper and Austin have one thing in common, and that neither one of them were cool. Piper didn't know who he is, but invites him into the ring. Carlito would tell Piper and Austin that he's in charge now, and he'd like them to leave the ring. And then Carlito would tease spitting the apple, but Piper would grab it from him and spit it in his face instead. This would piss Carlito off, and he'd start beating up Piper. Austin would just initially not get involved and would just simply watch this. And then eventually he'd grab Carlito and would start stomping a mud hole in him. Then Piper would poke Carlito in the eye, and then Austin would hit the stunner, sending him out of the ring. Then Austin and Piper would have a beer bash between the two, and that is until Austin decided to stun Piper as well. But of course, everyone saw that coming. I mean, who didn't? Fun segment, a great cool down from the previous match, perfectly timed. Next, we'd have the sumo match between Big Show and Akebono. This was a bit bizarre, but not necessarily in a bad way, I guess. I mean, seeing Big Show in the sumo gear may have been a bit weird, but this is far from offensive, this whole thing, and I've seen way worse things than this. The crowd was a bit quiet during the introductions, I think mainly because they were just probably just like everyone who were watching from wherever they were at this time. I think they were just trying to wrap their heads around what they were going to see and, just process everything. But Cole and Taz actually did a good job at explaining the rules. The two competitors would get into a bit of a slap fest to begin. Then Big Show would grab on Akebono's belt, trying to use his power advantage to win. But Akebono would knock Big Show out of the circle and even the ring, and would win the sumo contest. After this, there would be a bit of a sign of sportsmanship between both Show and Akebono. Didn't feel it was necessary to give this match a rating since it wasn't. I never really viewed it as an actual match. So yeah, Akebono would win. The next, we'd have one of 2 world title matches. These would actually be the final 2 matches of the show, which usually that doesn't seem to happen, so that was an interesting. We'd have the WWE Championship match between John Bradshaw Layfield, JBL, defending against John Cena. Once again, another well-done job in the video package here. I know I've said this countless times already, but I don't know, I just can't help but praise it. What can I say? JBL would make quite the entrance, as of course he'd arrive in this limo and would receive a police escort. He'd even have $100 bills fall from the ceiling with his face on them. Nice. The one thing I didn't understand, though, is why JBL would have Orlando Jordan get back in the limo and go solo for this match. Not that I care to see any outside interference in this anyways, by any means, but I just find it kind of funny how he literally like cheats in every single title defense he's had up until this point. Then all of a sudden, in his biggest match he had at the biggest show of the year, he decided he didn't want any help. So, am I overthinking this? I don't know. It is what it is, though. But here we are, JBL, John Cena, WWE title on the line. To begin, both men would lock up and would show the test of strengths. Don't know psychology-wise that was the proper way to begin this match, though, considering how heated the feud had become leading into this. JBL with Cena in a side headlock pushes Cena off into the ropes, and Cena would hit a shoulder block. JBL would then hit one himself. Then Cena would follow up with another shoulder block. Cena would charge and JBL in the corner. Then JBL would get the boot up and hit another shoulder block. JBL would hit Cena with some quelling blows, and the crowd would quickly die off. JBL would hit a swing neck breaker and would take complete control of the match. JBL would slingshot Cena in between the bottom rope and the middle rope. And then Cena would try to come back, but JBL would hit him with a spine buster. JBL would hit another neck breaker and go for a cover, followed by a 2 count. JBL would try to keep Cena grounded. He'd place Cena in a sweeper hold, and Cena would make a comeback with a side slam. Both men were down and would slowly make it back to their feet. JBL would send Cena to the outside of the ring and hit a third neck breaker on the floor. That's one thing I noticed in this match. There was like a lot of moves that were like repeatedly done. Like there was like a lot of moves that like kept being done over and over again. Then JBL would bring him back in the ring and go for a pin, but only get a 2 count. And then he'd place Cena up top and hit a superplex. So at this point in the match, it had been like slow, and like JBL had been mostly in control. But Cena would then hit his trademark backdrop side slam move and set up for the 5-knuckle shuffle, which he'd hit. Cena would charge at JBL, but would catch a big boot. JBL would come off the ropes, look for the clothesline from hell, and Cena would duck and get JBL up into the fireman's carry for the FU. He'd pin JBL, and just like that, John Cena would win his first ever world title. So yeah, this is far from being a classic, but nonetheless, it was the beginning of Cena's rise to stardom, which I can't really complain about, because John Cena is truly one of the greatest of all time, and one of the top 5 biggest stars ever in the history of the business. So I can't really complain about that. I just thought that, like, it didn't really get a lot of time either. It's like an 11-minute match, and like, I just thought that, like, JBL was basically in control like 90% of the thing. And then, like, kind of like and then, like, Cena, like, he basically came back a little at the end, and like, he hit his move, and then that was it. So, kind of uneventful, it definitely, like, could have been way better. But, although in terms of the JBL John Cena feud, though, the brutal Judgment Day 2005 I Quit match definitely made up for this. So, John Cena would be the new champion. First time ever he'd hold a world title. Star and a half in the match. What can I say? Like, it wasn't good, but it served its purpose. After the WWE title match, footage would be shown of the 2005 WWE Hall of Fame from the night before. This class would include the likes of the Iron Sheik, Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff, Nikolai Volkov, Jimmy Hart, and then of course you'd have Cowboy Bob Orton, Roddy Piper, and Hulk Hogan. The last 3 names of which we saw appear earlier in the night, and then we'd have Gene Okerlund introduce the Hall of Fame class of 2005 to the live audience. Following that, it was time for the main event of the evening. We'd have the World Heavyweight Championship on the line as Triple H would defend. He'd have Ric Flair in his corner. He would defend the World Heavyweight title against Batista. The story was just here. Triple H and Ric Flair were both Batista's mentors. Triple H was hell-bent on keeping the World Heavyweight Championship at all costs. Then Batista was the winner of the 2005 Royal Rumble match. Triple H would try to go Batista in the leaving Raw to move on over to SmackDown just to ensure he'd further protect his world title and wouldn't have to face him at Mania. But Batista would see through the cracks and would see that Triple H only cared about himself, hence remaining on Raw and challenging his now former mentor for the gold. Triple H would have his second Motorhead entrance at WrestleMania. Batista would have his, his point music. Not that there's anything wrong with it at all. It's definitely it definitely isn't "I Walk Alone," but it was fine. It actually still wasn't bad, but Although he didn't have his pyro either, so that part didn't look right, at least. Both men would walk